Sljedeću prezentaciju održat će nam gospodična Eleni Constantinidou. Ona je voditelj projekta u agenciji INEA i zadužena je za sve projekte koje vodi, odnosno koordinira Lučka uprava Rijeka. Hvala.
I'm Eleni Constantinidou. Nice to be with you. Thank you for your invitation. Our presentation will be in English because unfortunately I must be the only person in the room who doesn't speak Croatian anymore. So please bear with me on this regard. Thank you, Christian, for explaining how CEF works. It is in fact what the initial part of our presentation would have covered. So just to introduce you to what it would have covered initially is to tell you who we are as INEA and what the CEF instrument is, and then I would take you briefly through how we manage the projects in INEA, and also take you through some lessons learned by the implementation of projects from beneficiaries, not only in Croatia, but also from our other countries. So I will briefly take you through what INEA is. INEA is the successor of the Trans-European Networks Executive Agency, which was established in 2006. However, as of 2014, we have changed names because we now manage 4 programs instead of only one. Initially, we managed only the Trans-European Networks for Transport budget, but now we manage also budgets for energy, Trans-European networks, and also parts of Horizon 2020 related to energy and transport research. We are entrusted with certain tasks relating to the management of projects of the CEF program and the other related programs that I have just mentioned. And as a matter of administration, we are managed by our director and our steering committee, which is comprises of representatives from our 4 parent DGs. I will explain what a parent DG is in a minute. So basically, there is a difference between what a Directorate General is and what INEA is. So INEA is an executive agency in its name. The name already says it. We are here to implement a budget, to execute a budget, but to turn the policy into action. The policy, though, is defined by the Commission, so the Directorate Generals, who define the strategy, the objectives. They select they have the final say for the selection of actions for co-financing. They make the program decisions, and they evaluate the program and the agency's performance. However, INEA does not take policy decisions. Once the policy decisions have been taken, we are in charge of turning them into action. So we manage the project lifecycle. We organize the calls for proposals and the external evaluations. We monitor the projects once the grant agreements are signed with our beneficiaries. And then we manage also communication events. We organize the info days. And then once the lessons we learn from the implementation of the actions are compiled, we also provide valuable policy feedback to our parent DGs, so the cycle of policymaking is complete. So with regards to how much budget we manage and what the programs are, I have just mentioned them. I will skip the CEF program slides later because Christian has done a very good job in explaining them. Just to say that the budget managed by INEA has almost quadrupled this programming period. And now we manage the CEF program, to which I will return in a minute, parts of the Horizon 2020 program, which relate to research on transport and energy. And we have what we call the legacy programs. That these are projects that have remained, that are still open and in implementation from our previous programming period. and are now closing. There are practically none left for the 10T program. There are some left for the Marco Polo program. The Marco Polo program was basically a community initiative for shifting cargo off the road and onto greener modes of transport, such as railways or short sea shipping. So, for the Connecting Europe facility, you've all heard the priorities. It's under the heading of growth and jobs of this commission for 2014-2020 that the Connecting Europe facility was created. It is a key funding instrument for the acceleration of investment in the trans-European networks, not only in transport now, but also in energy and telecommunications. The three sectors have common goals. That is to create an up-to-date, high-performing, sustainable infrastructure connecting and integrating the EU and its regions. It is to support the projects filling the missing links in Europe's energy, transport, and digital backbone, and to remove bottlenecks. And foremost, to focus on EU added value projects, such as cross-border projects and projects of common interest, as these are defined in the sectoral guidelines per sector. Now, how do we manage our budget? Essentially, we distribute our budget via grants, but not only. In a second, I will also touch upon what Christian has said about Croatia being a new country, and how the Connecting Europe facility also has program support actions for member states to help them build capacity and expertise in the management of these projects. Now, we are mostly dealing with the Connecting Europe facility transport area. This area has three overarching goals. This is to remove the bottlenecks and fill in the missing links, ensure the sustainable and efficient transport systems in the long run, and optimizing the integration and interconnection of the transport modes, and enhancing interoperability, safety, and security of transport. As Christian said, our policy is centered around a network. There is the larger network called the Comprehensive Network. Its completion has a target date of 2050. And within that, there is a focus on a core network, which is to be, the target date for its completion is 2030. So to reach these objectives, there have been defined 9 core network corridors. One of them is the Baltic-Adriatic corridor, the Rhine-Danube, the Mediterranean, on which Rijeka actually is located. These were identified to streamline and facilitate coordinated development of the 10T core network. There are 9 of them, but there are also 2 horizontal priorities. They are the ERTMS deployment, so this is a rail traffic management systems, and motorways over the seas, both established to carry forward strategic implementation of the objectives of the core network, along with the other 9. Now, a small word on how we manage the process of disbursing the funds. So based on our regulation, the agency drafts annual work programs, which are coordinated and drafted with the respective parent DG, depending on the sector. And following their adoption by the Commission, the agency then publishes calls for proposals in accordance with the priorities set in those annual work programs. After that, we are also responsible for organizing the evaluation of these proposals through the aid of external experts. And then these external experts, first individually and then collectively, evaluate each proposal, and but the Commission has in the end an internal evaluation to have final say on the selection of grant agreements to be given a grant. Now, once this selection decision has been made, INEA, myself included, we are responsible for contacting the beneficiary and coordinating with the beneficiary in order to agree on the terms of the grant agreement, in which we essentially have three parameters: what is in the scope, by when it has to be done, and with which budget. Now, a small clarification on the 2023. Please note that not all projects have the possibility of ending in 2023. Projects have the possibility of ending at the maximum date that is inscribed in their respective call for proposals. So, for example, for the first Croatian project of CEF in 2014, it is the Brajdica terminal. It would not be possible to extend it, even if it didn't finish on 2020. The latest date it could finish is 2020 because it is an eligibility criterion of that particular call. The calls are legal documents and we cannot go beyond them. However, for the 2016 call, indeed it has been possible to, in exceptional situations and duly justified, to have projects with an end date which goes a bit further than 2020. That is because, unlike DG Regio, we do not have the N+2 rule that you may be accustomed to. Once the grant agreements are in place, our job is to first be there for you to help you with your issues in implementation, but also we are responsible of making sure that the community budget, the taxpayers' money, is put to good use, so according to the terms of our agreement. How do we do that? We ask you every year to submit progress reports within which you explain how your projects are advancing, whether there are delays, what the reasons for those delays are, and not only once a year, but also many times a year, we try to meet or coordinate so as to provide solutions or find ways to mitigate the problems that the issues cause in the implementation. This is very helpful for both sides because sometimes it only takes a little push, but also it's helpful for us to know that if a project is not advancing and will not be spending its budget, its allocated budget, it is in the impossibility of reaching its objectives, then or has cost savings because of lower contracts, because of discounts during the procurement. INEA has the obligation, based on the regulation, to make sound financial management. Therefore, these funds, these non-utilized funds, are recovered in order to be able to re-inject them into actions that were not able to receive funding, even though they were good due to the scarcity of funds. Sorry, the animations are. Voilà. After we receive your reports, we are able also to give feedback to the Commission, to inform them of what the most the most frequent issues in implementation are, and the Commission then takes them also into consideration when drafting policy papers. This is just a small slide that Christian has already mentioned as to how much CEF contribution Croatia has received. As you can see, there are 3 sectors plus the synergy The synergy sector call, there was one synergy call, and one project from Croatia has received funding. Otherwise, in transport, you have 32 projects with a total cost of 512 million and a self-contribution of 424 million. 96 of those are for the port of Rijeka. So in this part of I will try to keep it brief. In this part of the presentation, just to mention some challenges that we frequently see in the implementation of projects, and tell you what we as INEA expect from our beneficiaries in terms of reporting, and clarify some issues if there is a need. Now, as I said, once the grant agreements are signed and implementation is ongoing, we ask you to submit action status reports. These reports are submitted electronically through our system, and the deadline is the 31st of March for each reporting year. Reporting years are calendar years. The template is provided on the website, and in the first status report, we ask you also to include specific information, mostly related to your governance structure, your audit strategies, and so forth. And please note that the action status report has both a qualitative and a quantitative reporting element. That means we ask you to textually report on what the progress is, but we also ask you to tell us how the action is advancing financially, how much it has spent, whether it needs more money, and on this basis, we can also talk about whether or not you need to introduce a financial statement, a payment claim. Speaking of which, an interim financial statement, so a payment claim, is something that is an obligation for the beneficiary according to the grant agreement. And it has to be submitted at least once every 2 reporting periods. That means 2 ASRs. 8 months after the end of the end of the reporting period. So essentially, 4 months after the ASR is submitted. The template is provided on our website, and provided that there are also financial information in there, it is requested of you to have your expenses audited and provide an audit certificate with the ASR. For the final report and financial statement, which happens once the project is over, please note that these two have to be submitted simultaneously, which is the difference with the interim financial statement, which can be submitted separately from your reports. And we have 12 months after the action finishes to submit the final report and the financial statement. Now, to come back to touch upon a point from Christian, to reassure how member states are informed of or need to be informed of the implementation, because we are not in shared management. We do not go through the ministry for the signature of the grant agreements. Please note that, first of all, the member state co-signs the application form. Furthermore, that means that the member state has read the proposal and agrees or condones what is in the application. Then in the application forms, there are questions related to how the project proposed complies with both our policy, but also with national strategies in this regard. So to reassure the member states that the projects selected they're not selected at random. And from a step backwards, the policy is nevertheless agreed with the member states. The Commission discusses with the member states and then defines the policy. So, voilà. So to come back to this point, it is to say that once these financial statements, these final financial statements that need to come through the ministry to be certified, the ministry has a visa, let's say a right to view them and an obligation to certify them. And this is where we also avoid double financing, because let's say operational programs have so the same beneficiaries that we do, but we don't see them because they are managed through, centrally via the ministry. It is also the ministry's then responsibility and obligation to check these expenditure to make sure that the same expenditure has not received two types of European funding, which would that would be against the financial regulation, and the money would be recovered if then found out. I'll be brief. Just a word on procurement, because yesterday we were also touring the projects, and we know that there are some delays in Croatia related to procurement. What the grant agreement and the financial regulation stipulate is that for contracting authorities, so public authorities, you are subject to the public procurement directives. If I'm not mistaken, the Public Procurement Act was adopted in Croatia as of the 1st of January this year. It was transposed. Although this may mean that this may mean some delays because of rights given to bidders to intervene in the process, it is meant to protect every party of the procedure. So please take that into consideration when you're preparing both your project applications and when you're doing your risk management plans. For the beneficiaries that are not contracting authorities, so that they are not subject to the public procurement directives, we ask that you practice sound financial management. There are guidelines for that as well. DG Budget regularly updates their website on what sound financial management is. It is of utmost importance to basically comply with the procurement rules of your own establishment. Why is procurement important? Procurement is important because if it doesn't comply with either the directive or the sound financial management principles, these costs are considered ineligible. The grant agreement, Article 219, describes what the eligible costs are in categories, and basically, in a nutshell, it means that they have to be described in the grant agreement. They have to be indicated in the annex, which shows the budget, are identifiable, verifiable. That means there is a trace of them, there is an invoice of them, both in your accounting system and on paper sometimes. They comply with social and tax obligations, and they are reasonable. Some ineligible costs are deductible VAT. Indirect costs are no longer an eligible cost in the Connecting Europe facility. In TEN-T we used to have them, but in the CEF we do not. For land and building acquisition, it depends whether or not your grant agreement benefits from the cohesion fund money rather than the CEF general envelope. When you submit your interim or your final financial statements. Please note that we do not ask you to provide all of the invoices. INEA does a sampling of your expenditure and asks for proof on certain items between those. And for one of them, there is also a request to provide information on the procurement that has resulted in that particular expenditure. The purpose being to establish whether the public procurement rules have been followed. I'm coming to the end, a little patient. Just to say a few words about what we usually see as recurrent issues and what we think is a good way to mitigate them. Now, multi-beneficiary actions, so actions which have more than one beneficiary, have inherent complexities due to the coordination needs whenever money is involved, whenever actions are involved. So we do recommend that the coordinator be a strong body that has experience in these domains, and if and when you encounter delays with your implementation, please, the coordinator is invited to immediately contact INEA so that we can find solutions together. Delays also happen in non-multi-beneficiary projects because the projects are dynamic, infrastructure projects are very big. So what we usually see as problem is that the project fails to start at the agreed date. So it has some maturity issues because either the previous design phases are not done, or the procurement, if the procurement delays are not factored in the work schedule. I would once again invite you to carefully, when writing your applications, to carefully factor in these possibilities, these risks, so as to have a more realistic implementing plan and to avoid a loss of funds if the project goes out of the deadline. Another issue that we see is that there is a long period to submit final reporting, which essentially creates some issues with regards to commitments for money. So we encourage you to submit your final reports as early as possible, so that we can then also visit the project once it's done to verify whether it has reached these objectives. Also, this is the case also for the ASRs. It's advisable to send us draft documents so that we can advise you as to the writing and the elements that might be missing. So as when the official deadline comes, we avoid going back and forth asking for clarifications and that meaning that you don't receive your reimbursement, your grant money as soon as you would like to. The next point also touches again on the need for drafts. If the quality of the report when submitted is not optimal, let's say, it takes a very long time to go back and forth with the beneficiary to receive reassurance for the taxpayers, to leave an audit trail behind that the money has been well spent, and for the money to be disbursed. So please, again, we encourage you to send us draft documents so that the INEA project managers are in a position to guide you through whatever might be amiss, to basically maximize the receipt of your grant. I've already touched on the public procurement procedures. You have delays on both pre and post launching. They are not new, we all know them, so please, once you're writing your applications and once you're presenting your annual status reports, please factor them in the implementing plan so that we have a real image of of how the project is advancing. Some frequent audit findings, and I really am finishing right now. We've touched upon them before. Some of the costs are found to be outside of the eligibility period. This doesn't mean that it is because you pay them outside the eligibility period, but because the work is affected outside of the eligibility period, in which case the funds need to be recovered, or there is an inappropriate declaration of staff costs in your system, or they are excessive. For the public procurement, frequent findings are not using EU-level procedures, or cutting a contract into two, so that the what we call slicing, so that the total value of each contract allows you not to perform an open EU procedure. And with regards to when there are amendments of contracts and additional works, sometimes we find they may be necessary, but sometimes we find that the works that were done were not foreseen in the contract, or that the unforeseeability is not justified. So you cannot justify that you could not foresee that such additional works would have been necessary. So INEA is here to support you. Please proactively contact us at any moment if you have issues in your implementation, so that we can find solutions or mitigate the consequences. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Za početak htio bi kolegici Eleni iz INE postaviti pitanje. Sad tu smo vidjeli da Republika Hrvatska je povukla skoro 93% alokacije, preko 450 milijuna eura. Međutim, htio bi pitati šta iza. Čuli smo da je bilo 3 poziva, da li slijedi 4., da li 5., da li se planira nekakav drugačiji, sličan instrument CEF-u i da li Hrvatska može participirati u njemu?
Thank you for your question. It's true that so far there have been 3 CEF calls in the field of transport, out of which in which Croatia has been quite successful. Currently, as per the obligation of the regulation, INEA and DG Move are doing an assessment of a midterm assessment of the program of CEF, whereby all projects will go under review, and if to see what the state of their implementation is, and whether or not there will be a possibility to re-inject some money in the budget, which has actually mostly been already committed to the projects in the first 3 calls. So this whether or not there will be new calls can only be answered after this exercise, which will take place in April.